Y'all ready to rock? Awesome.
Hi, I'm Chris White, and I wrote and directed a coming-of-age music movie set in a world that, while very real and important to me when I was a teenager, is more on a foreign planet or alternate universe to most people. This past year, we've screened Electric Jesus, a comedy about a group of heavy metal missionaries in the summer of 1986 at dozens of film festivals across the United States. And we're just about to release the film everywhere. Audiences have bonded with the characters and the story, but more than a few have asked questions about the music and the subculture that produced it. Electric Jesus, the music behind the movie, is your VIP backstage pass into this crazy world. And in the immortal words of Skip Wick, our Christian rock huckster with feet of clay and a bad toupee,
the Rock and Roll Road Show. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Episode 2, You Gotta Believe, the secret to a great rock soundtrack with special guest Daniel Smith.
John, one of the things about Daniel Smith is, and I think of this almost every time I'm with Daniel Smith, is like, I wish I had known you when I was young. Like, I wish I had a Daniel Smith in my life when I was a teenager, because he's such a creative, imaginative, and just reasonable guy. Right. And I didn't know a lot of people. Did you know people like Daniel when you were young?
Yes.
Just that creative and
But I'm an anomaly. And I will say what's fun is about this whole journey with you in this film is that when you first told me that you were making a movie about a Christian hair metal band in 1986. Oh, and there's this guy, Daniel Smith from Danielson, and he's going to do all the music. I thought, now I've known Daniel since the beginning. Like he came to True Tunes. I've known him since he started doing music. I love that guy. He's amazing. I thought you had lost your mind. I was like, what are you thinking? Like, he's the most artsy, out there, cool indie, like he's gonna do metal. It's gonna sound like, you know, quirky, weird, like it's gonna be a send up. I totally thought, oh my gosh, this guy, he found the wrong, as much as I love Daniel Smith, he found the wrong guy. Boy, was I wrong. So we're gonna talk about your partner in crime, and we're gonna talk with him and to him and bring him in on this. So yeah, I was really, really happy to have been as wrong as I could be about your choice in composer and co-writer for Electric Jesus. But yeah, I was fortunate to have people like Daniel Smith. We'll talk about that more later, but for now, maybe,
here's something else about Daniel, and here's the little thing that I think he and I connect on so well. And also like the thing that made it clear he was the guy to work with on this movie is his complete lack of irony. Like, he's very sincere, and he was able to step in this space without any winking at the audience.
Right.
And that is important to Electric Jesus, that Electric Jesus is not making fun of its characters or the music. It's having fun with them. And it's taking them as seriously as they took themselves. And he's that, if you say we're going to take this seriously, he's all for that. He's there for that all day long.
All right. Well, let's head into the interview suite with
good.
Daniel Smith, Chris White, and myself talking about Electric Jesus. So, hey, Daniel, welcome to the Electric Jesus podcast. This is going to be a fun conversation, but the first thing, just right off the bat, I wanted to ask you guys to talk about is when you first started conceptualizing how this thing was going to work and what it was going to sound like, how did functionally that conversation start, and then how did the conversation turn into actual work so that there's actually music getting made that's going to end up in the movie? So just kind of walk through how the score, the sound design, the concept of the music started. What was the genesis, and how did it go from genesis to actual creation?
I think it's fair to say that when we started working on Electric Jesus music, neither one of us really knew what we were doing in terms of making movie music. And I think that worked in our favor for both of us. You know, the first thing is how is Daniel going to get paid? How are musicians going to get paid? How are we going to make this happen just practically, financially, so that we can properly collaborate? A lot of the early work on this was business work that we did, and our business partners that we're both married to, our wives, were also involved in that. I mean, it became we were trying to figure out what is this going to take to pull this off, and this was before we had a first day of shooting set. You know, like we think we're going to shoot in several months, and if we are, we need to start working, but how do we start working? So a lot of it was just practical to begin. And then once it began, then it became, let's make some 80s rock songs.
Yeah, I can add to that. It started with, a couple thoughts at the same time. One was the practical of okay, well, we have to figure out how we can afford to do this. And that was one thing. And at the same time, we didn't really wait for that to kick in. We just, while we're waiting around, let's start with something. And the way I remember, like, I had forgotten this, but I think I wrote the music for Barabbas first. I think that was before Commando, the way I remember it now. And so, but again, this music needed to serve the characters that Chris created in this story. And then part of the characters are these bands. And the first band and the most important band is 316. So we really kind of started with just the ground floor up. You sent me the lyrics to Barabbas, I believe it was, now that I think about it, first. And during those couple months of just kind of beginning this discussion, that's when I was fully immersed in metal of all sorts, circa 85 through 87, and other Christian music too. But I was kind of in that world. I was excited about this idea and thinking about how to write music to these lyrics. And so we kind of just started and hoping that, there would be a shooting date at some point. But also we recognized that the music needed to be at least in rough mix form before we shot any of these scenes. So the music needed to be written. And sometimes, writing things happens quickly, and sometimes it takes a long time. So you don't really know. So the sooner we start, the better. I remember just saying, we got to get this stuff done, especially because I think at the time, the first round of kind of initial shooting plans it wasn't a full whatever it ended up being year and a half later, but which I'm glad I had all that time now that I look back. But yeah, we started with one song and it was super fun, and it seemed like it was working. And then we worked on Commando second, I believe. But you had all these lyrics written, right, for Barabbas, Commando, and Girl. I believe those lyrics were written when you wrote the script, or after that, or certainly before I.
Yeah, I would come to a place when I was writing the screenplay where a song would go, and almost like a musical, like in the idea of a Broadway musical, the action is happening, and then the characters start singing when there's something that needs to be expressed. The emotion is best expressed in song. So when I would come to places where these songs existed, it felt like I needed to put a marker down and say, this is what they're singing and what they're singing about. So that certainly did come in the screenplay. And, one of the gifts of working with Daniel was that, when I did say, look, I wrote some words, but these don't have to be the words, because I don't know how to write a song, but it seems like these would be the words. He was very kind, or it was just a generous thing for him to say, no, let's use them. Let's use them, and let's build the song around the words. I'll say this too, like one of my favorite music movies is Once, the John Carney movie with Glenn Hansard from The Frames. And one of the reasons that very simple, beautiful movie works so well is the songs are strong. Many of those songs had been honed over years with Glenn's band, The Frames, touring. And, so not a few of those were new songs in that movie. But if you think about music movies and rock and roll movies, and you think about the ones where the songs really were good, they stuck with you, or they become a character in the movie. It's hard to do that on the timeline of a film and making a film. Films are greenlit and then they're shot. As soon as a film is ready to happen, it happens. Investors don't like their money sitting in escrow for 2 years. So I guess we would say it was a gift and a blessing in retrospect. At the time, it was miserable, but the gift in retrospect was that we did have time to work on the songs. Even at the end, which I hope we do get to talk about working on producing at the end of the process after the movie shot. In the year of pandemic, we were actually afforded some time to produce them properly and hone the pieces, not just the songs, but the score. Who knows? Maybe we wouldn't have had, if some magic film producer had just shown up at my house and gave me the money to make the movie, and we just did it. Who knows? We might not have as strong songs and score as we do.
The interesting thing, having kind of been involved with it all along, but also watching the music from the side, is that you've got these songs that you wrote specifically. These have to be in there. They are central to it. Then you have these ancillary songs that are kind of fun. They're important. They're the secular band songs or something like that. They've got to rewrite, and then you have these third level songs that are really far out there, and you can have a lot of fun and just kind of, go wherever you want to with those. And then you kind of created what I'm referring to as a sound design and score with stuff like the Arcade Reigns track. So tell me about that sort of concentric circles of songs, from the central ones we've already talked about to the next rung out of the evil bands, to the background song, to the ones that are like the video game songs. Like, how did you think through that to create the design of how this world is going to sound? Was it a patchwork, or was there a thought process from the beginning that then you went out and executed?
Well, I think it was all building blocks. It was built. 316 was what is the foundation to these songs for the movie, like that, and that's how the score ended up coming out of the 316 songs, because we liked that idea. But even before the score happened, there were the 316 originals. There were 316 cover songs that were part of the assignment, so to speak. That was Chris's vision. These are the songs. I want 316 to cover these songs, and there were, a handful of those. That band happened first. All those recordings happened first. And then the Bloody Mass song, that's a key scene in the movie, and that song needed to kick butt. And it had to do its own thing. And so in a similar process, Chris wrote those lyrics, and we discussed the person, or not necessarily the personalities of this band, but who they are, where they're from. They're from Norway. They're scary. They're scarier than anything these Christian kids can imagine. And let's have fun with that. Same thing though. Let's make a great song if we can. Let's make a really cool song with these kind of dirty lyrics.
Yeah, that band called Bloody Mass definitely is supposed to be a dirty sexual, gross kind of lyric. But the conception of that band is, the rock band in a chick comic book or tract, like a Jack Chick tract, that were very anti-rock and roll, but very much rock and roll is demonic. And I just have a memory of seeing things like those comics and those little, the comic books and the tracks where a rock band would be playing, they'd just be screaming something that just seemed, insidious and dirty. And so I thought it would be that band's song, which is called Love. They just need to be screaming about love, which is not the same love that 316 has been singing about. It's not agape. It is definitely eros. But Daniel's right. Like, the song still has to be good, because it's gotta. If the secular, the evil bands in the movie play music that's terrible, then you just scratch your head and say, why would a bunch of people be going to that show? Like, why would that intimidate 316? But seeing the spectacle of that band and hearing them play, which is a real important moment in the movie, just like, oh man, you've arrived, and you are now at the concert in hell, and now what do you do? 316 was really important.
And then real quick, Dan, you actually got to play the lead singer in the movie. Was that was a thought later on, but that's your first movie role, I understand, other than the movie about you.
My acting debut, Stig Foss, yes, the singer and bass player from Bloody Mass.
And you did a good job. It was very convincing.
Chris White gets all the thanks for that. Peer pressure.
I like how your mic is like up and you're singing up into it.
That's Lemmy. That's totally Lemmy.
That's Lemmy from Motorhead, yeah. And they are, like, Bloody Mass is kind of, they're our motorcycle band. And just when you think that's as scary as it can get, there's Satan's Clutch. They're so scary they're not even allowed on the screen.
No, we couldn't put them on the screen and keep a PG rating.
Oh. Wow.
Uh-oh.
God doesn't even want us talking about that. Chris literally just got knocked off the feed. Wow. Jack Chick is having his way with this podcast right now. He doesn't even have his headphones on. He literally just got knocked off the feed. His headphones knocked off his head. Either Satan's Clutch or Jack Chick just intervened.
It was a demon.
Was that Gargamel? Was that Gargamel that just knocked you over?
He did. Didn't pay proper respect.
So now you've got the original music tracked, at least tracked enough to film to it. Now, what about all the glue music, the stuff like I remember we were listening, we were planning on putting a needle drop in the radio in the kitchen when the mom and Eric are hanging out. It was supposed to be a banal CCM song, so I had several options, that I had found, and that was going to be. And instead, you went and created that song "We Just to put at a level no one will actually hear. It's just like so quiet. It's so quiet in the scene, and then we get to find out, if we read the credits of the soundtrack, that that's the band whose naked picture is drawn on the side of the joy explosion, and they have this syrupy worship song. So that's what I mean by that next circle out, the sort of luxury of being able to create these songs that just add to that ambience. Tell me about that step. Like what was going on in the thinking for those types of songs?
We had way too much time on our hands and we were having way too much fun. And I say that facetiously because that is what should happen when artists are locked in and creating. It was I think this is fair to say, Daniel, it was kind of like a 2.5, 3-year jam session where it kind of became a conversation where we just keep pushing, there's a little bit of budget here. There's a little bit of space. Let's populate the movie with something else. let's not license a song. If we're going to spend the money to license a song, why don't we record a song? And if we were going to record a song, what would that song be? Oh my gosh, we've got that RV that's got this band called Joy Explosion. We haven't heard a word from them. What if they had a hit Christian song? What would it be like? And so that's where all that stuff comes from. It's from, some of it is just the practical, do we have the budget and time to do it? But a lot of it is just getting out of the way of artists, creating a space where the artists can just jam together. And that's why there's layers to the music in the movie that shouldn't be in the movie. A movie of this budget and this size. We cared about it. We made that happen. We created that space for it to happen. And that's why we have, a joke song for, maybe a couple thousand people in the world will think that's the funniest song they've ever heard. But it gives a depth to the world of the movie that it wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, and we had a momentum going, and it was working. So let's just keep going. Let's look for areas that we can make more new music together. But it was a similar process of all the pretend bands, in that Chris is creating these characters. I keep going back to that, but that's the point. And then writing the lyrics, and then we discuss kind of what should it sound like. We trade music, and then I just write something and send it back. In the case of We Just, Ellen, my wife, and I wrote that together. She sings on that. So I guess really that's Ellen and I on the side of that RV.
No, it's two women and a man, but actually the other person would be John Mark Painter, because he brings the fretless bass to it.
That was John Mark Painter in drag, yes.
Oh no, don't even give me ideas. There's going to be a reworking of the Joy Explosion illustration with you and Ellen and John Mark Painter.
So yes, John was very. So I sent John for that song. I sent John the synth part that we wrote and our vocals, and John just went to town with the with the fretless bass and the drum machines, and he really worked that triangle. I mean, if you listen carefully, that triangle work is unbelievable.
Wow.
We just
So you've got primary songs, secondary songs, tertiary songs, and now let's talk about the score. It's a different kind of approach to doing the score. So, and what I noticed, in my opinion, is that at that level, that's where the movie starts to not sound exactly like an 80s movie. It's no longer really set in the 80s, right? Like the story is happening in the 80s, and the songs are 80s rock songs, but there's this sonic element that's kind of pulling it to today with some of that score stuff, because it sounds very modern to me, like in a hip kind of indie way. So tell me about the thinking behind the score and how you blended all those things, like pulling elements of certain songs into it and all that stuff. How did that work?
Well, technically, this is an aesthetic consideration. The film is a memory. The film Electric Jesus is a memory movie. Somebody's telling us about something that happened years ago. And, at least with me, with my memories, they're clouded with, they're mostly untrue, probably. They're probably not that literal. But they're also clouded with my remembering and my reflection ever since whatever happened, right? So memories are a kind of dreamscape that we can create in. I think, Dana, we did agree that the instrumentation of the score would be contemporary to the movie. The score would be made by instruments that would exist, in a recording studio in 1986. So I think there was some rule there. But as far as composition, we're scoring a movie and telling a visual story and using music to help us tell the story. So in that sense, nothing about that was in quotation marks. Nothing about that was ironically presented or, notice the music, how clever this is. We've done it all. We did the whole score on a Casio keyboard. That could be an approach. That could be a valid approach for a movie like this. But instead, that's when I just kind of get out of Daniel's way and just say, dream this up.
Yeah, and that's true. The instruments, which is kind of the palette, we had decided let's keep everything within basically analog. There's synthesizers on there, but there's synth sounds that would be around in the mid '80s, and then so that kind of, which was great because I like all those sounds. So that was fun to know that I could work with all that, and so there were a couple of things kind of happening at the same time. We thought, wouldn't it be great if Commando for Christ, if I rework those into kind of soft rock versions of these sections, right? So the verse repeating, and that would be an instrumental, and then the chorus and some other, and the intro is its own piece, and the same with Girl. And then so with Girl, for example, I'm kind of reworking these things and presenting them to Chris, and we were kind of at the same time talking about, would maybe Girl, the instrumental of Girl, should kind of be the theme song for the girl in the movie. So, and it's not that on the nose, but it appears at all the right moments. And so we started following that of let's think about these pieces of music kind of conceptually in a way, especially with Girl. I think it's fair to say that's the love song. So anytime that's appropriate, and I reworked quite a few different versions of Girl, some very stripped down versions. Grand piano, which I thought was really silly to have grand piano playing Commando for Christ melody at a moment, or whatever. That was way fun to do all that. So really kind of just make all these pieces and then start to put them in and see what works. And then Chris would come back and say, yeah, this should be a more maybe fleshed out version of this thing, or more scaled back in this scene. And really I just see the whole thing as just building blocks. So that was the next step of starting to put those more major pieces of music in spots where they needed to be, for sure. And then there were other areas that we weren't sure if it should be a needle drop or original music. And so sometimes I would try to put some things in there. It wasn't working, but, and vice versa. And so again, just trying things out and see where it got us.
And you were actually scoring it to the picture, or were you just creating all those things and giving it to the editor, and the editor was playing with that stuff and getting back to you, or how was that working?
I would create the music, and then I would place it in the scene where I thought it worked. And, since I'm a control freak, I would do as much of that myself as possible.
Which is how it should be done. In the picture edit of the movie, the editor, Scott Lansing, and I had placed some temp tracks in different places just to remind us, making a film, I don't like the scoring process. It's I love doing it, but we work so hard in the edit to make the scene work with actors and cinematography and art direction, and we fine-tune this really beautiful moment of cinema, and then music comes in, and music, the first time I hear music with a movie scene that, I've edited, I just feel like, oh gosh, there goes the music telling everybody how to feel. I wanted it to be simple and elegant and beautiful, and crickets chirping in the background, and now here comes some strings. And all my filmmaker friends just say, sorry, that's one of the tools in the toolbox. You're making movies, so you got to figure out how to deal with it. But early, it was clear that Daniel's score was giving distance, giving space for the established cinema to work. It was just bringing it up a level. And I think that scene on the trampoline with Sarah and Eric talking, which would have been a variation on Girl, was the first scene where we had a timed and pretty much produced. I don't think it was a demo. Maybe it was a little demo-y track that we laid in there. And I can remember, fingers crossed with Scott, okay, here we go. This is what the score is going to be. And both of us just like starting to tear up watching the scene and like, oh man, this is going to be good.
Do you have a girlfriend?
No.
Have you ever had a girlfriend?
Not so much.
Oh, it's probably better that way.
Same thing when Eric gives that speech to the band. I'm tired of playing churches and camps. We gotta. Our message is for people that don't go to church, and that score there, that music there, every time gets me. It's perfect. It's perfect for that moment. And it's
that scene's a setup for that.
Well, yes, but it's also one of the Commando themes, right? It's also one of these. We're commandos for Christ. It feels like, Henry V, and he's inspiring the troops to go out and fight the next day. And the score just comes in so beautifully there. So, but yes, we typically you're going to lock your picture, maybe using some temp score, and then you give it to the composer, and they should deliver timings of the songs. And that's what we did. And even if we had a scene like, in a fine tune, the first edit that we were showing people was maybe about 10, 15 minutes longer than the movie is now. So we did cut some things. I don't know if we had scored things that we cut, but once the picture was locked, there were timings, and it was very specific. And we would give Daniel a quick time movie of, here's a sequence, I need music to go there. And he would work it out.
Chris is right. This band's the real deal. And this opportunity to play 316 songs in a real rock club filled with lost people. Guys, this is what it's all about. Look, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of preaching to the choir at these churches and camps. I mean, half of these people, they think all rock is evil. They don't want to hear our music. We should play somewhere where they do. I want to make Jesus famous.
I think this will be the last question, but tell me, Daniel, about the soundtrack album now that it exists and you can listen through. And you're an artist who's made a bunch of albums, and you know what it's like to finally get an album done and listen through it and kind of assess it. This is unique in your catalog for sure. So how do you absorb this, and how does it hit you as you go back and listen to all of this music? How does it strike you, and what kind of feelings does it elicit, and how do you feel about the soundtrack as a work apart from the film?
I think it's a great record. I couldn't be more proud to be part of it, and I love that we kept going. So we covered the score, but then after that, we're putting a soundtrack together. Let's just keep going. What other characters from the movie were not represented? And so there were a few more, Soul Exhumation, and then there was some, kind of, I don't know if I shoehorned it in, but wanted to put some Danielson songs on there too. There was one that ended up being called Passing Through Wall of Flame, and there's an instrumental version of that's kind of the Purgatorio theme song as you're introduced to the Purgatorio. So I added lyrics to that, vocals, that's on the soundtrack, so it's a slightly different version. And then had some fun with a couple covers and an original with that I was fortunate to get lost lyrics from Larry Norman's brother and family, and I was allowed to write new music to that.
And which one is that? What's the name of that one?
Come and Save Me. And so all those Danielson songs are just, well, two are covers, but they're my nod to Jesus music that I grew up on and have fun with, and then a new track as well. But the whole piece, the whole album as a collection, or it's I think it's a great record, and it's all over the place. And I think right now, between now and when the movie comes out, it's a slow burn, right? So I mean, I think people can have fun with it now and enjoy it on a certain level. I think once people see the film, I think they're going to go back and enjoy it on another level. I really believe that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it reminds me that how for a while there it's been, and maybe even still to some extent, but definitely in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was pretty common for there to be a film with a soundtrack, and then they would even put out a music inspired by. So these songs had nothing to do, they weren't in the movie there, but there was just artists that were going to, I loved this Narnia movie, so I'm going to write a song inspired by it, and then they would, put out an album full of songs. So it felt like you even had kind of songs inspired by Electric Jesus on the soundtrack, made by the same people that made Electric Jesus. It's like we combined it and we put it all on the same thing for you. So that's a lot of fun.
And it's really the tracking of the record is such that listen to it straight through, and it is an experience. Like I remember, I used to always listen to records from side A to side, all the way through. And I feel like the way we put the songs together, they are echoing maybe the story and the themes in the movie, but they are their own things. It's its own listening experience, which was important to us, that we could make a product that was standalone. If somebody never sees the movie, will this still be an entertaining record to listen to? And I think it definitely is.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Electric Jesus podcast. A big thanks goes out to our guest, Daniel Smith. You'll be hearing from him more on future episodes of the show, by the way. And of course, our host, the writer, director, and producer of Electric Jesus, Chris White. For more information about the Electric Jesus film, visit electricjesusfilm.com and make sure to sign up for the email list, also known as the G's Team. You should also check out the Electric Jesus YouTube channel and Facebook groups for great behind-the-scenes videos, updated information about the film, and more. All links are available on the show notes page. This podcast is produced by myself, John J. Thompson, and Bruce A. Brown for Gyroscope Productions, and is intended for the private use of our listening audience. Everything on the Electric Jesus podcast is used by permission or under fair use provisions, and with the exception of previously copywritten materials, is the intellectual property of Blue Tape Records, LLC, and is protected by U.S. copyright law.
Next time on the Electric Jesus podcast, one of the architects of Jesus rock, Res Band's Glenn Kaiser, talks with us about what the Jesus music revolution was really all about. What it was like to marry the gospel and hard rock when that was still a no-no. And what he had to say to bands like 316 when he met them out on the road.
Really think about what you're doing. There are a lot of people that have gone shipwreck in their faith, who went to Nashville to make it, whether Christian scene, mainstream industry, whatever. There are a million people out there. What are you bringing to the table that's so special?
He said that he had your number. You cut the telephone line. You say you needed a reason. He said there ain't much time. You kept trying to avoid it, and you kept knocking on